Hey everybody, Ty here. Hope everyone's doing well. So, in recent time, we've been talking a little bit more about severe weather. We do have a marginal risk today. We also have a slight risk for tomorrow. This is going to be stretching off to the east now, where originally we had talked about areas a little further off towards central, maybe west central Texas being a point of interest. Now we're looking towards the Mississippi Delta, southwest Mississippi, north central Louisiana, and also eastern Texas now at this point here. And then we also have a day 3 marginal risk that stretches into the Gulf Coast here, southern parts of Georgia and Alabama as well. May see a small portion of the East Louisiana coast involved as well here at this point. One thing that all three of these days have in common is the mid to lower levels of the atmosphere are actually going to be the biggest inhibiting factors. The environment is just not that impressive. Now, the thing is, with day 2, we do still have a 5% tornado threat there, along with a 15% wind threat. So, definitely something I'll be keeping an eye on. Not necessarily sure I'm going to be going live for this one. I'll be on standby, depending on the timing, of course. But, nonetheless, here, if I were to look at the weather models, you can kind of see why. I mean, looking at the let's go ahead and actually start by looking at the upper levels of the atmosphere. You would think that this would look good going off common weather knowledge, considering the fact that we have a pretty stout trough coming into play. Starts to take a neutral tilt at this point, and usually when we get that, the environment starts to become a little bit more favorable for severe weather. Thing is, when we get an overnight tonight here, the forcing is not all that impressive. We do have some short waves in the upper to mid levels of the atmosphere. Really, it's more so towards the upper levels. Mid levels is where, of course, we start to struggle, as I mentioned earlier. And the same thing can really be said as we head into Thursday's setup, and then eventually with Friday, it's pretty much the same thing. Just the dynamics just don't really seem like they're really coming together here. And here's a better look at those mid levels of the atmosphere. What we're particularly looking for on this map, even though it's the same thing, we're looking for short waves to pop up here. We're looking at these contour lines. We're trying to find little ripples within them. And if we were to go ahead and take a look at the timing here, it's not really until about, I would say, midnight where storms will be expected to be at their peak here, just based off the kinematics alone. Thermals will probably still be in place in regards to temperature and maybe dew points to go along with it. But with the lack of instability that we're going to be expecting over the area and subpar lapse rates, I'm not going to really expect a whole lot out of this. And the same thing can be said as we head into the evening, overnight hours. Not really much in the way of short waves tomorrow here, so there is a small chance that I would see a downgrade possible with the Thursday setup here. So we'll just have to wait and see how things pan out. I expect a lot of these storms to kind of form along the frontal boundary as well, so I'm expecting a predominantly linear mode with maybe a couple of prefrontal cells possible, but really not going to be expecting a lot out of it. And then the same thing can really be said as we get into Friday here. We're really more or less just dealing with the remnants of what we have from Thursday. And like I said, Thursday just doesn't really stand out to me right now based off what I've been seeing. Once we get past the upper levels towards the mid to lower levels, that's really the best that I've seen with it so far based off model data here. Low level jet's gonna be there. It's gonna be moderately prominent here, but with the other parameters not really looking all that abundant, I have my share of doubts. Keep in mind though, as we look towards this time of year for severe weather, usually we tend to have high shear, low cape events. So the wind shear really is going to be more or less the driving force behind any kind of severe weather at this point. Instability just isn't going to be quite as prominent as what we might see, let's say, a month and a half, 2 months from now. But nonetheless here, those high shear, low cape events still have to be watched, and they're very hard to forecast. So nonetheless, even though we're talking now like we're kind of skeptical at this point, do have to pay extra close attention to that. So two things we're going to be looking at here. We're knocking out two birds with one stone. We're going to be looking at the temperature map on the bottom left corner here, where we're going to be looking at that warm sector, and then we're going to also kind of time it in with this moist sector here. So we're about to go ahead and time this up and move forward at the same time. So this is what we have going on towards East Central Texas. It's heading into tomorrow. And what you'll notice here is as we're moving these forward at a similar pace here, is that both of these areas, the warm sector and the warm sector and moist sector, it's a tongue twister, they go hand in hand here. So originally you would think, okay, from the thermodynamic perspective, we're looking at the moisture, we're looking at the temperatures. It's looking good. We got temperatures in the 70s, we got dew points in the mid 60s. Looking pretty good. We'll stretch this further out towards the east to go along with it. And you'll see that warm sector coinciding perfectly with that moist sector again as we head off towards the southeast here. Problem is, as we go further along here and we look at some other details, i.e., the lapse rates and the surface cape, this is where we're kind of lacking here at this point. So these are our lapse rates that we're looking at right now. Typically with a severe event, you're really looking for 7s and beyond. Those are pretty steep lapse rates. By the time we get storms to start firing over towards this region here, towards Texas tonight, we're just under the threshold. So, I mean, there's some potential to work with here as we go further into the overnight hours. It becomes less impressive. Not really all that surprising. But when we look at tomorrow in particular, we're struggling to get lapse rates in the 6 degrees Celsius per kilometer range here. So not a whole lot to work with here. And then it doesn't get any better as we get later into the evening. Also, the fact that we're going to be past sunset at this point, where we'll see a slight drop off in the temperatures to go along with it, and a decrease in available moisture. It's also going to kind of bode against this setup really kind of ramping up at this point as we move further off towards the east here. As we get into the day tomorrow, or we get into the day Friday, it's pretty much a similar deal. Lapse rates remain relatively shallow towards the mid levels of the atmosphere, even more so towards the lower levels. And then on top of that, it doesn't help that our surface-based CAPE values are not that impressive. Considering the fact that I usually like to look at these convective models because of the CAPE values being picked up much better on here, and just seeing values that are not that impressive on here definitely makes me a little bit more skeptical of the setup as a whole here. We'll go ahead and take a look at the SKU-T chart to go with it. This is right along that Mississippi Delta. As you can see, kinematically, we're looking pretty good here, especially towards the lower levels. We have this long looping hodograph, so tornado potential is there. But look at the surface instability, just barely reaching about 1,000 joules per kilogram. It's going to be a big inhibiting factor in all of this. Also looking at those lapse rates, which is right here towards the lower part of the screen, you can also see that things aren't looking all that great here as well. We've got lower to mid-level lapse rates around 6. Towards the upper levels, we're getting towards 6.5 at best. So, like I said, kind of an uphill battle, but not to say that tornadoes are not possible in this, but given the environment that we have, not the most ideal to say the least. As we keep the ball rolling here, you can see that instability never really truly recovers over towards the region here. Might be a small little pocket here. We might even get to about 100 joules per kilogram at this point. Not all that sufficient when it comes to severe weather. A little bit later in the afternoon, because we're at the far end of the range here with the HRRR here, we could have a little bit of action. So may do an update video tomorrow. We'll see how things kind of pan out with this at this point here, but as of right now, not expecting a whole lot out of Friday here. This could always be one of those days where we end up punching above our weight though too. So that's why I'm still making mention of it at this point here, because you don't hear a lot of people talking about the setup on social media. I mean, I can see why, but truthfully, always got to watch these setups just in case, because these are the most tricky setups, truthfully, the ones that we have during the winter. So here's our storm developments kind of picking up a little bit later into the evening. This is when convection kind of peaks over towards central Texas as we get into the day, or we get into the overnight tonight. Then as we get into the day tomorrow, you see a little bit of a linear mode develop. Slightly messy convective mode here. Timing is definitely off at this point, because peak instability over towards the delta was over towards 20Z, which would be right around 4 or 5 o'clock. Based off the timing of this line here, it looks like we're going to lose the peak here. So at this point, by the time everything's rolling through here, we're not looking all that impressive. Still a little small line of maybe stronger storms that pops up, let's say towards early Friday morning and into the afternoon. But based off what I'm seeing, it doesn't really look like it's hanging on due to that lack of instability once more. So, like I said, as of right now, just not really looking all that impressive, and I'm not all that impressed with the setup either. Do have to, of course, look out for those little minute changes here due to the fact that, of course, these wintertime severe setups are always tricky. They always have a little surprise for you here and there. But that being said, hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll have a follow-up video tomorrow. We'll kind of just go on from that point. Until then, take care and have an awesome rest of your Wednesday.